starting her first year as an MFA student 6 months after earning her MA in creative writing, fiction at SFSU. She's a science fiction, fantasy, and horror writer, and has one horror short story published by Sparkle and Blink. She's currently working on a middle-grade children's fantasy novel and is brainstorming a vampire western for an older audience. You'll often find her tutoring at the LAC, in line with the Pete's Coffee in the library, or talking your ear off about her fan fiction. So I'll welcome Tammy. Thank you.
It's over here. Don't fear the microphone. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to read is going to be from Chapter 7 of the middle grade fantasy novel. This is a modern interpretation of Thumbelina. At this point, Thumbelina is living in a dollhouse, an old man's house, essentially. She's made new friends with this cat named Harley and the spider that lives in the corner. And those are just the characters you need to know. Alright, so this is part of Chapter 7. "Merry Christmas," Harley said when she opened the shutters. Or, "Merry Christmas Eve. You've been hiding in here all day. Is everything all right?" "Feeling a little lonely, I guess," Thumbelina sighed and folded her arms on the windowsill. "I miss the sisters." "Oh, well, Norman is trying." "I know he's trying. You know, even if I was with the sisters, I'd still feel a little lonely." "How can you feel lonely, though? We're friends, aren't we?" "Of course, but sometimes I wish that I had friends about my size so they can fit inside here with me. I don't think there are others like me, though." "I'm sure there are. Maybe they all just live far away." They chatted a little longer before Holly left to wait at the door for Norman to return from dinner with his family. Thumbelina closed her shutters again and dragged her miserable self up to bed. Harley only meant to cheer her up, but in all of her months of living in misadventures, she had not seen one sign of another person as small as her, and the hope of meeting others her size was starting to feel a little bit sad. Harley didn't seem to be lonely, even though he was the only cat in the house. He soaked up the attention from Norman and was content with that. Perhaps it was easier to try and be content with what she had as well. Just as she was about to fall asleep, she heard a rustling of legs, and Corner threw her bed sheets off. "You must come to my web, Thumbelina. I caught another little human," the spider rattled off. "But this one had wings on its back. I thought it was just a fat fly, but I bit it a little, and it turned out to not be a fly, but a little human creature. I untangled it from my web, but it didn't fly away. It just fell down, and it isn't moving, and I may have killed it." Thumbelina followed Corner out of the house, her heart kicking against her ribs, because this did not sound like a regular, ordinary man, but a fairy. They rushed onto the windowsill where the crumpled body of the little man lay. He had wings like Norman said that all fairies did, but these wings were red and dry like dying lily petals. She could see why Corner thought the fairy was a fly. He wore a thick black armor that gleamed blue-green when turned in the fading sunlight. A small hole in the back of his armor showed his swelling wound. When she touched his graying face, his skin still felt warm under her fingertips, and he still breathed. "I think he's still alive," she murmured. "Help me carry him back to the house." She picked him up by his armpits, but Corner swept him up by the torso and scurried back to the house. Thumbelina chased after Corner, feeling dizzy from what she saw, not knowing if she should believe what her own eyes saw and her fingers touched. Thumbelina met Corner in her bedroom, with the unconscious fairy sprawled on his back on her bed. "He doesn't look good," Corner said to her. "I know that," Thumbelina said much louder than she meant. "He'll die if we don't do something soon." "What are you doing?" Corner peeled off the armor in jagged bits. "I want to see if he's liquefying." With most of the armor in a chunky pile, Corner poked holes through the fairy's yellow undershirt and pants with a long leg. Thumbelina stepped to his side and took the black helmet off. His face looked like it was carved from polished topaz, from the tip of his narrow jaw to his thin cheeks to his round forehead. His cap of black hair warmed to brown under the lamplight. He looked as human as she was, save for the wings. She wanted to throw her arms around him, like he was a long-lost brother, but this was a brother she had never met before, so she hugged herself instead. "He is still quite solid," Corner said. "He's probably just sick from the poison, but I think the fall hurt him more than anything else." Thumbelina let out a relieved sigh. "We should still bandage up his wound, though." "With what?" "I have some water to clean it with, and I'll just tear a blanket to wrap it with." "I can wrap him up with my silk," Corner cowered at Thumbelina's glare. "Just where the wound is, and I'll not tie him up so tight that he can't breathe. Trust me, my silk is a lot stronger and more flexible than your blanket. Thumbelina agreed, and together they gently flipped him over to clean the angry red right on his back. When Thumbelina fetched the water and soap, she returned to find a pile of rags with the fairy's shirt on the floor, and Corner dangling the fairy up with one leg and sliding the red wing back and forth with another leg. "What are you doing?" Thumbelina shouted, nearly spilling the water all over the place. "This creature is so strange. He wears a beetle skin and beetle wings over his own. Look," she said, and completely took off the red wing to reveal a near invisible wing inside. "Just put him back on the bed, please." Corner did as she was told, and Thumbelina cleaned the green residue off the wound. The angry red softened to an irritated pink. Thumbelina grumbled as Corner held the fairy up by his legs, so she didn't accidentally wrap his arms around with his torso. But she took that moment to look at him a bit closer. He looked healthy and strong, though a little lean in his shoulders and ribs. His brown skin was only a couple shades lighter than hers, but his long face was growing red from being held upside down for too long. Before Thumbelina said anything, Corner sipped her silk string and laid him down on the bed. "See? Still breathing," Corner said, prodding the fairy's foot. Though they looked as delicate as glass, the fairy's wings were quite flexible and easy to straighten out over the mattress. Thumbelina tucked him in with a clean blanket, feeling the firm bumps of elbows and knees and shoulders. After she thanked Corner, the spider climbed up the fireplace, and Thumbelina headed downstairs to collapse on the couch. She slept dreadfully, waking up in fits and starts with tears in her eyes. She stared up at the dark ceiling, wondering if the fairy was still alive. She'd sit up, one leg off the couch, and then immediately bury herself under the blanket again. Norman was probably home by now, but most likely asleep. Harley was probably with him. She could get Corner to check on the fairy, but what if the fairy was dead? Would Corner eat him? She would stay down here in the living room, where the fairy was still alive in her mind. Morning light soon flooded the room, but Thumbelina still remained on the couch, hoping that the fairy was awake too and would call out for help. "Are you awake?" Thumbelina shouted. No answer. Maybe he was still asleep. If she had been bitten by a spider and fell that far from its web, she would still be sleeping. She would also probably be dead. The house itself was a sleepy quiet. Eventually, Thumbelina rolled off the couch and dragged herself one step at a time up the staircase. She knocked on the bedroom door once, twice, 5 times, but there was still no answer. Slowly, she creaked open the door and saw no one on the bed. She opened the door fully and found the fairy squatting in the corner. Outstretched wings pressed so hard against the wallpaper that they almost looked painted on. Thumbelina shrieked and slammed the back of her head against the door frame. The fairy didn't move as Thumbelina held onto her throbbing head. "You're alive, that's good," Thumbelina said, her heart throbbing from both the shock and his intense glare. "I'm sorry that my friend hurt you. Are you feeling better?" He blinked his wide blue-gray eyes. "You're friends with the spider," he said, his voice harsh and dry. He could talk, and she could understand him, and he could understand her. A smile grew on her face as she continued to talk to him softly. "Well, yes, we're neighbors. Do you need some water? You live here?" "Well, of course. Are you? What happened to my arm or my shirt?" he sputtered, his chest heaving and his eyes never blinking. "Corner, the spider, broke it so we could help you. Wait here and I'll bring something to drink." She hurried down to the kitchen, opened up a corked glass bottle of water, and poured a teacup's worth of it before heading back up. The fairy stopped tugging at the spider silk. She put the teacup before him and sat down beside the door. He stared at her for a moment before reaching over to grab the cup with trembling hands. "My name is Thumbelina," she said as gently as possible. "What's yours?" "My spear," he demanded. "What did you do with my spear?" I didn't know you had one," she mumbled. He drained his cup and set it next to his knees. "The spider probably has it," he said, finally blinking, and his wings quivered. "My name is Opossum." "That's a nice name," she said, though she was mentally trying to memorize how to pronounce it. "You don't recognize it?" She thought for a moment. "No, I never heard it before." "That can't be. All fairies know my name." "Oh, so you really are a fairy," Thumbelina squealed. "You're the very first fairy I ever met." Opossum stood up so fast that he broke the teacup under his foot. Thumbelina stumbled up, her newfound joy souring into fear as he fanned his wings out so they filled up as much of the room as possible. "Never? You've never met a fairy before," he said. "No, I haven't. Not even your parents." "The sisters?" He demanded to know who the sisters were and where she was born. She hoped her quick explanation would calm him down, but instead he grabbed her by the arm and pressed a hand along her back. "What are you doing?" she said, and slapped his hand away. "They must have cut you off your wings when you were too young to remember. I was never born with wings. I don't have any magic. I'm not a fairy like you are." She could still feel the leftover burn of his hand over her spine, like he had branded her for not having wings. "The humans really have brainwashed you," he said, while looking like he was about to throw up. "You must think that you actually live here, and are being kept here." "I do live here," she said, her fear now twisting itself into anger. "I lived outside before, and I chose to live here." "Did you choose to name yourself Thumbelina as well?" "What's wrong with Thumbelina?" "You're calling yourself a thumb. A little thumb. Did you never realize that?" "Thumbs are useful," she said as she squared her shoulders. "That's why the sisters named me that." He rolled his eyes. "You deserve better than that ugly name." "It's a name I like, thank you," she hugged. "And if you don't like my name, or my house, or me, you can leave." Apollyon took a step back, folded his arms across his chest, and took a breath. His wings folded and draped down his back like a cloak. "This rescue isn't going as well as I hoped." "Rescue?" she laughed. "Yes, rescue. I was flying by when I saw you in the window the other day. You were being hypnotized by a small human machine while the human was working at his desk." "Machine? Do you mean the phone?" she laughed. "I was watching cartoons on it, not being hypnotized." "Regardless, I waited and watched to see where you were kept. It didn't surprise me that your prison was modeled after human shelters." "Maybe because it's not a prison. Maybe because it's a home that's meant to be comfortable." "Meaning you'd never want to leave it. Humans can be tricky that way." Thumbelina huffed at him again. "Norman isn't like that. Once you meet him, you'll understand. It's you that doesn't understand that you're being kept here like a pet, being content living by yourself, not knowing my name, becoming friends with spiders. I'm friends with cats and birds too. Some birds. They're quite friendly once you get to know them. And what makes you so important that I should know your name even though I've never met you?" Now it was his turn to laugh a rippling laugh. "Because I am Apollyon of Anderson Grove, Prince of the Fairies." Now Thumbelina had heard of kings and queens, princes and princesses, and sometimes a lord or duke in the stories she read and watched. She knew that people who weren't royal were supposed to curtsy and be uncharacteristically polite to those who were royal. But instead, Thumbelina gawked at him, still angry at his rudeness, but her curiosity about others like her was overtaking her anger. "Prince of the Fairies," she repeated. "As in, all of the fairies. There are more." "Of course there are more. Why wouldn't there be more?" he snarled. "Because in all my life, you're the only other fairy I've ever seen." "How old are you?" "Almost a year." He wiped his face down with both hands. "Do you know how old I am? I am 142 years old. There's not as many as there used to be, but there are still hundreds of us out in the world." They were interrupted by the thud of Harley leaping up on the table and rubbing himself against the house. Apollyon grabbed Thumbelina and shielded her with the wing, but she tore away from him and ran to the window. "It's just Harley," she said. "He's my friend." "He's a cat," Apollyon stammered. "Don't open the window." Thumbelina threw open the shutters and held a hand out to scratch the tip of Harley's flat nose. Harley meowed in response, and Thumbelina drew her arm back so that Harley could look through the window with one green eye. "I thought I smelled someone new," Harley purred. "Yes, it's Apollyon. He says that he's Prince of the Fairies of where was it again?" "Anderson Grove," Apollyon said through gritted teeth. "Right, Anderson Grove. Do you know where that is, Harley?" "Never heard of it, but you should ask Norman." "Norman, the human?" Apollyon said, his whole body shaking. "No, I won't be meeting any human. I need to leave." Thumbelina sighed, but she remembered how afraid she was when she first met Norman. So she wondered what humans he had met to make him so afraid of them. "Is Norman awake?" Thumbelina asked Harley. "No, he's still sleeping." "Then you should leave before he wakes up," Apollyon. The prince only nodded. So he was terrified by cats too, but so was Thumbelina when she first met Harley. She swallowed down the rising bitterness that the first fairy she had ever met was so mean and angry. But if he was honest about there being more fairies, that meant that there was another chance of meeting other, nicer fairies that she could invite into her home. She just needed to be patient. By the time Thumbelina helped the fairy prince bundle up his broken armor in a blanket, Coroner stopped by with a long spear still sticky with webbing. Thumbelina's heart flipped at the sight of the black curved spearhead, as big as her head. "We'll meet up again, Thumbelina," Apollyon said before fluttering off and nearly swerving into the wall. "I'll make sure he gets out safely," Harley said and patted after the fairy. Coroner knelt next to Thumbelina and prodded her for details. "Well, if he comes again, I'll make sure not to bite him," Coroner said. "Even though he was mean to you, he was probably just frightened. I'd been called some nasty things by my dinner." Thumbelina shuddered. "I suppose that makes sense. Maybe I should make a second wedding. in case he or more fairies come back. You're not gonna catch them, are you? Thumbelina warned. Oh no, just in case they destroy my web again. He ripped a big hole in mine last time, and I had to throw it away and make a new one. It was a pain. So that was the Thumbelina excerpt. How am I doing on time?
You've got another short one?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this one is going to be from the Vampire Western. So I'm just going to skip to, I only worked on chapter 1, so I'm just going to skip to the end. So this one is with Eli, and he's got a crush on the new school teacher in town who is just as plain and boring as he is. And let's see here. I'm just going to read part of when he's talking to Jed. Hold on one sec. Okay. And this is set in 1860 in a town that's very like Bodie, California, which is a ghost town. It's but it's called Varney instead. No relation at all. Alright. Eli would leave town again for a cemetery on the opposite side of the outskirts, where he met the grave digger Jedediah and his yellow mule. Jedediah was a scrangly fellow with a knotted mop of black hair and a chopped up beard, but his overalls always splattered with dirt and sweat and crushed worms. He was halfway through digging a new grave when Eli arrived. Eli hitched his horse a good distance away from Jed's mule, who had no name but would come running whenever someone called out, "Piece of shit!" "I appreciate you coming all the way down here, Eli. As you can see, I got my work cut out for me," Jed said from the inside of the half-dug grave. With the mule's foreleg between his padded thighs, Eli said, "It's no trouble, though I wish you called me sooner. This show looks like it's been loose for a while." "Well, I've been working so much that I haven't given it a thought." "I could charge you for this work, Jed, so you could spare a thought." The mule groaned in relief when Eli removed the shoe, but snorted and huffed and the moment Eli picked the caked mud and pebbles out of the hoof. I should have turned before I snorted. I have a terrible list, I'm so sorry. Alright.
All the best people do.
Alright, but snorted and huffed the moment Eli picked the caked mud and pebbles out of the hoof. "Alright, I will," Jed groaned. "But like I've been saying, I've been busy with all the murdering going on. Considering the amount of liquor that flows in the streets," Jed slammed his shovel against the dirt, "it ain't the normal way to die. Well, mostly it is, with people getting shot or knocked in the back, but there's been one that was unnatural." Eli finished Eli finished his picking and brushed away any remaining dust before reaching for a knife to cut away at the dead, flaky skin at the bottom of the hoof. "Unnatural how?" Jed grinned wide enough to show his yellow teeth and waved a giant paw at him. You ain't got the stomach for it." Eli shook his head. "Well, if you don't think I can handle it, then you better not tell me." Jed chewed on that for a minute. "Nah, you couldn't handle it. You don't know anything about caring for the dead." Eli stopped for a moment before he slid the knife back in his tool belt. "What do you mean by caring for the dead? Your only job is to dig up and fill graves." "Well, sure, but you've got to make sure they're actually dead. These folks here are crazy enough to bury their relatives alive. So as soon as the funeral is done with and the family's left, I make sure that the dead are dead." "How?" "You just take off the top and feel for a heartbeat. If there's nothing, you just lock it back up again. I could have saved a girl. Could have. If she hadn't been packed up so long. I opened the lid and there were scratches on the underside, and her nails were all bloody." Jed held up his own dirt-crammed fingers and pawed at the air, and Eli's stomach knotted up so tight that his burning juices shot up and scalded his heart, which made him shiver. His hands trembled as he pulled out the long rasp to file down the hoof, but he cleared his throat so his next words would come out sounding stronger than he felt. "So those are the murders, people being buried alive." "No, like I said, this is more supernatural. The funeral was quick, too. When I checked on him, he had 4 holes in his neck and not an ounce blood left in his body. Looked like a damn prune except for the eyes. Those had to be sewn shut." Eli said nothing as he rasped the mule's hoof down with quick strokes, his tongue pressed hard against the roof of his mouth to stop him from gagging at every despicable detail Jed laid out for him. The grave dig was right. He did not have the constitution for it. So what do you think of that? Jed proposed. I think that whoever murdered that poor soul was someone touched by the devil, he said with a shudder. I'm surprised I haven't heard anything about it. You'd think that's in the town in a panic. Jed shrugged. He wasn't anyone important, I guess. No family, money. He drank and gambled whatever gold he found in these hills. You knew him? I knew of him. He was an old cuss that pissed in the gutters. He tried to steal my mule once, but he was too wobbly to mount him. God rest his soul. Their conversation petered off for a while, and Eli had to focus on shoeing the last 3 hooves. Jed returned to digging and piling the sandy dirt in a nice round pile. Once he had dug deep enough to just be able to look out of the lip of his hole, he crawled out and watched Eli finish his work as well. Thanks, Eli. I appreciate it, Jed said, offering his hand gloved in splinters of dirt. If you died, even in a natural way, I'd attend your funeral. Even if you moved far away from here, I would make sure to pay my respects. Eli quickly shook hands with him and tried not to wince when he felt the prick of the splinters. Thanks, Jed. Eli hurried home, navigating through the grid of saloons and dance halls on practically every corner. He untacked Mist and took his dinner upstairs to his room. Cornbread, green beans, and 2 roasted potatoes with water. To eat by himself once again. Halfway through eating his first potato, however, he felt the familiar sick feeling he got whenever he tried eating with everyone downstairs. He dug his fingers into his lean abdomen, clenching and unclenching until the twirl of acid in his stomach began to ease up. He tried eating again, the scrape and clink of the flatware on his tin plate filling up every silent square inch of his room until he felt it would burst. Eli threw the flatware down, pulled his coat on, and stepped outside to take a walk in the dusk light. As his feet carried him towards the schoolhouse, he wanted to blame his illness on the horrific stories Jed told him. The closer he inched towards the school, the storm in his stomach eased. His eyes wandered up each golden lit window of every hotel and boarding house, hoping to catch a glance of Miss Morton, and try to say what he meant to say after good morning. It was a fine morning, wasn't it? It was the same cold, cloudless morning as many of them were in Barney. But it was fine all the same. Did she like the mornings, or was she more of an evening person? Was she afraid of horses, or just disinterested in them? How did she end up in Barney? Were her parents still alive? His still were, or at least according to his siblings they were. How many siblings did she have? A barn owl swooped overhead, its belly glowing yellow under the street lamps. He watched it for a moment, his mouth agape at the sight. He had never seen a barn owl, or any kind of owl, since he started living in Barney years ago. He followed it and wondered if this owl would be as life-changing as the one from his youth. Following it might just lead to Miss Morton herself, and he could redeem himself from his cowardliness from this morning. The owl flew into a dark alleyway between the closed Sayer building and the general store, and Eli guessed it must have made its nest there. He stood for a moment to let his eyes adjust to the darkness, hearing the sound of air being sucked up in long fizzing slurps that made his toes curl up in his boots. Jed's description of the dead man flooded his mind again, and he stepped back for a moment. Someone on the second floor of the Sayer building turned on a light, and a shard of that light was enough to light the alley for Eli to see a woman clutching to a man sprawled on the street, her head buried in his neck, a bloody knife inches from her gray skirts. The jaundiced eyes of the man were as wide as his mouth that twitched as if he were screaming, though only a choked gurgle came out. The woman sucked against the man's neck without realizing that Eli was standing there. Eli, who had nothing but his own knife on him, whipped it out and held it towards the woman. "Stop! What are you doing to him?" Eli shouted. The woman snapped her head up, curly hazelnut hair dripping over them. She snarled at him. Her fangs painted with the same blood that oozed out of the dead man's neck dribbled down her thin lips. Eli dropped his knife as he met her familiar gray-eyed gaze and fainted dead away on the cobblestones. That's it.